What is up, Nets fans? Welcome to the Brooklyn Buzz. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Jack Manuell. What is up, Jack?
Good to have some wins on the board, Nick.
Yes, I forgot what it felt like to get back-to-back wins, over the Raptors and the Knicks, division rivals. So that's always great, too. Ended that 8-game losing streak, so a positive note for the Nets. But as always, check out the Brooklyn Buzz on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, NetsRepublic.com, Dash Radio, and YouTube. But, Jack, do you think the Raptors game could be a turning point for the Nets in terms of closing games and feeling more confident about themselves, beating the best team in the league record-wise?
Yeah, I mean, Nick, if you're going off of the post-game interview with D'Angelo Russell, which sort of was the talking point heading into this Knicks matchup, it sort of felt like it. The video session with all of the players only. I'm assuming was also part of that sort of turning point as well. So I think it certainly was, and even just seeing the communication down the stretch in that Raptors game, you could see that there was, a noticeable shift. There were certainly some worrying moments in that last quarter against the Knicks, but obviously we closed it out. But it certainly feels like it, Nick. But there are a lot of those that sort of come throughout the season. But I think at this point in time, to be the best team in the NBA, I remember I was running the OTG account last night, and I put out, what was a more surprising win, the Bulls over OKC or the Nets over Raptors. But for me, to beat the best team in the NBA, it's probably one of the better wins of the season for any team.
Yeah, especially the Raptors, like you said, Jack, the way they've been playing, having Kawhi Leonard, having Kyle Lowry, who they did a great job defensively on yesterday, able to win that game when obviously the Raptors are super talented and close it out. It has to be a huge confidence booster. The issues are still there, but I think that's something they can kind of lean back on later in the season, be like, all right, we beat the Raptors in the fourth quarter. We can beat, X, Y, and Z team. Long as they're not, the Golden State Warriors, they'll feel pretty confident in most matchups. So the Knicks, beating the Knicks tonight, 112-104, should add to that confidence, but there were still some flaws in the fourth quarter. But we'll start from the top. What were your takeaways from this one?
Yeah, Spencer Dinwiddie, the new shoe comes out. It's the 25th of the year. He scores 25 points. He's got the number 8. It was his night tonight. Jared Allen as well, another double-double. He's 11th of the season. He continues to do well. And D'Angelo Russell, despite not scoring the ball well, had 11 assists and was 1 point away from that double-double. So real team effort. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson continuing his consistency, really starting to show some defensive flashes that we saw from him last season. So a lot of good things from the Nets. Probably played 3 quarters of basketball, and that last quarter where the Nets benched those young guys, they just got the better of us, but we were good enough to close down. And a mini shout out to Alan Crabbe as well, who has been, a little bit streaky, but his percentages have been pretty good as of this sort of losing streak and then the mini winning streak we've been on as well.
Yeah, and I tweeted this out during the game, a good Alan Crabbe makes a huge difference for the Nets. That three-point shooting, that off-ball movement, just the energy he can bring when he's knocking down shots is big for the team. You mentioned Rondé. Really nice to see him get that energy back defensively, offensively, cutting to the rim. But I thought right from the start, the Nets did a good job of kind of setting the tone by playing some really nice defensive positions. There's a couple possessions for the Knicks where they were just denying pass. The Knicks ended up shooting a bad shot in the shot clock. Kanter did his. He owned them in the paint when he was in there. But I felt like the Nets did a great job of attacking him on the defensive end, which they didn't necessarily do in the other games when they faced the Knicks. Tonight, you saw Jared Allen go at him in the pick and roll. You saw Rondé attack him. You saw Spencer Dinwiddie, making sure he couldn't, if he was going to be out there and scoring points on one end, they were going to attack him on the other end.
Yeah, I mean, when they were out in that fourth quarter, Enes Kanter was nowhere to be seen when the Knicks were going on a run. So it just goes to show that despite the fact that he puts up these ridiculous numbers, and he's one of the most talented offensive big men in the NBA when it comes to around the paint and around the post, he doesn't really impact winning basketball, which is what you want from your center. Whereas I think Jared Allen, generally what he does on the floor on both ends, it impacts winning basketball. And, it was reflective in tonight. And he was out there before getting fouled out with a couple of minutes left to go in the game. So Jared Allen impacts winning basketball. Enes Kanter, on tonight at least, he didn't.
Yeah, exactly. Jared Allen has a really big impact on the game. He only had 2 blocks tonight, but it felt like he had more because he was contesting so many shots at the rim. Very impressive stuff from him. It seems like he's grown every matchup with Kanter. Tonight, he handled him a little bit better, had a couple blocks and nice defensive plays on him. Offensively, what did you like from the Nets? The ball movement seemed like it was very nice, especially in that first, second, and third quarter.
Very, very crisp, Nick. The ball was buzzing around, really humming. It wasn't really anyone sort of taking over. Loved the attack from Spencer Dinwiddie. I was holding down Net Republic on Twitter. Spencer Drive Witty, Spencer Rimwitty. There was plenty of tweets going out around it. He just is an absolute master. His angles, with him and Karis LeVert, we own that area. And even Rondé, to an extent tonight, was getting his own there and drawing contact. So, and D'Angelo a couple times as well looked really nice. That floater obviously is one of the most gorgeous plays that any Nets player has. But yeah, Spencer Dinwiddie, the driving, the kicking, it just opened up so much of the lane, so much spaces for the 3-pointer. It was just when the ball is humming, it's the ball moves faster than the player. So if we're sort of comparing it to that final play before OT when D'Angelo Russell sort of held the ball, you could sort of tell he wanted to hold for the final shot, but the ball just wasn't moving. You'd much rather get into a play, and the Nets were making some really nice sets, and it was just emblematic with some big quarters. Most quarters, 38 points, especially in that third. It was a really wonderful. The offense was really humming.
And you mentioned that third quarter. I felt like that's where Dinwiddie really took over in that late third. He got Mitchell Robinson switched on him a few times, and he just went to work on him. You saw a crafty drive to the rim where he protected the ball by attacking the other side. You saw him hit him with a fake and just scoop it up. So Dinwiddie's definitely in his bag tonight. It was very nice performance from him. What did you like from Rondé? Kind of lost the Raptors games too. We saw some defense. We saw some drives to the rim. What are you liking about him? Do you think he's starting to get some of his athleticism back, from the injury?
I think not even athleticism. I think it's more just confidence. I think Rondé, more than any, you could probably argue Alan Crabbe as well, is a player that feeds off confidence. 2 3-pointers made as well. That he's been. What was it again that you put out, Nick?
4 I think 4 of 7 in the last 5 games.
Yeah, so I mean, he can take that shot, and I think if he's making them, keep going for it. His form isn't going to always be perfect, but if he makes it, you can just see the confidence that it gives him, and he knows how much that sort of impacts the team, and it sort of it helps him on both ends of the floor. The defensive energy he brings on a nightly basis for the past sort of week or so. He's been absolutely dominant. That final possession against Kawhi, that really, really crafty strip down low, and to be able to, dodge and somehow leap over the ball and not find contact and get the ball back. He was really key in that sort of stretch where the Knicks were making a run. So for me tonight, it was Rondé and Spencer, but, you could argue both of them had as much an impact.
Yeah, definitely nice to see Rondé. It feels like offensively he's starting to find his rhythm where, he knocked down the corner 3 twice, but it was also nice to see him cut to the rim, give those drives. I think he's somewhere where, we saw the Knicks attack D'Angelo and Spencer Dinwiddie that fourth quarter, hit double teams with them. Rondé's a guy I think that could step up in that area because he has some ability at that 4 position to dribble a little bit, make a little bit of plays. He can improve in that area, but I think it's something the Nets might look to further in the season.
Yeah, and the mid-ranger was hit a little bit as well, so it just seems like all aspects of his game that we marveled at in his season review last year are sort of starting to come back, and all of the other areas sort of feed each other. Basketball is, it's a really complicated sort of sport, but it's more than any like many other endeavors. It's based off of confidence and how you're sort of feeling within yourself, and then how that impacts those around you. But Rondé is showing some really good signs, and he could be earning himself a nice contract. We'll have to wait and see, but still early days. But the signs are good.
What did you think about the rebounding battle? The Nets only ended up winning 45-40, but at different points of the game, they're up by 10 in the rebounding battle. Offensive boards in the first half, they really worked them.
Yeah, it seemed like it was just a real emphasis, Nick. It seemed to be, there was 3-4 guys down there, down low. Even offensively, it seems to me that, whether it's a shift from the coaching staff or the players, that they've made it, a real point of emphasis. I remember reading Tom Haberstro's piece the other day, and the fact that if you win the rebounding battle, it's one of the key indicators to if you're going to win the game. I think it was like something like 75% of games have been won if you win the rebounding battle. And I think that's probably emblematic of the Nets as well. It might even be a greater percentage, especially this season. We have some, really elite rebounders in our team, and our guards have some good size about them. So I think that should be an area where we continue to focus on, but both defensively and offensively, because it really feeds energy. Getting that rebound, boxing out, doing all those little things. It ends the play in a lot of sense of the word, especially when it's defensive rebounding. Is probably one of the key aspects of defense, and if you're doing that well, a lot of other areas take care of itself. So yeah, rebounding was a really nice sort of aspect that I saw from the Nets tonight. Even if we didn't win it by such a large margin, it felt like more.
Yeah, in that first half too, offensive rebounds definitely had an impact. I think when you have a second unit of Ed Davis, Rodions, and Amari Carroll, they did a great job of getting in there, poking the ball out, and getting some easy putbacks.
Yeah, 8 offensive rebounds, 5 for Ed Davis, 3 for DeMar Carroll. It just shows you that these guys just know what they want, and you can't you can do anything that you want against Ed Davis, but he's getting the offensive rebounds. Leading the league in offensive
Exactly.
rebound percentage. It's just an area where you can't stop him, and I'll like again that he played in another 20 minutes tonight. It's good to see him, getting past those teams because for me, Ed Davis is a guy that deserves, around that 20 to 22 mark. I want to see that consistently from him, not just from a viewing aspect, but he does impact positively whenever he's out there. He can give away 5 or 6 fouls. He gave away none tonight, but if he's out there for 20 minutes, he loves seeing that aggression and energy.
Yeah, exactly. And he's a guy that's probably been one of the best Nets players this year, at least consistency wise. And like you said, Jack, the advanced metrics love him. So I think 20 minutes is definitely a good mark from him. Mentioning Rodions, we saw him coming with the second unit. Are you happy about him? He had 0 points tonight, but you kind of still felt his impact out there.
Yeah, I think I can't remember. It was some Nets Daily writer put out the fact that he still does the right things, and you can see his brain is almost moving too fast for his body. There's times where he just wants to do a little bit too much, sort of has that eagerness, and you'd much rather see that from a guy like him rather than showing sort of the timid nature that we might
Yes.
see from a lot of other young guys. So Rodions is going to have his up and downs, and it might see him get a couple of DNPs here and there, but he still was, +2 in the evening. He gave away 5 fouls. It seemed to me defensively is going to be the area where he's going to need to improve because he has really nice offensive awareness, and he sort of, when the Nets were out there, sort of then that ball was really moving around. Rodions was moving himself, and sort of, that ball and play of movement has an impact. But yeah, I think defensively is going to be an area where he's going to really need to make some strides, and whether that's in the G League with the Long Island or whether it's on occasions with the Brooklyn Nets as well. I think the Suns still remain very good.
Yeah, and I think it's just small things too. We saw him get that one stupid foul on Tim Hardaway Jr. where he just kind of swiped at his wrist after he already shot the ball. I think it's just small things like that. Now, do you think Rodions will go back to the G League, or do you think he's starting to earn himself consistent minutes with the Brooklyn Nets?
Yeah, I think we had a mini chat. I put it out on Nets Republic as well. It's going to be a question of matchups. Is Shabazz Napier going to see time, or is it going to be Rodions Kuruc? So I think it's going to be down to those two. Those guys are, number 10 in the rotations. Jared Dudley as well, only saw 7 minutes tonight. Though I did like what I saw from him, so I'm not sure whether those lesser minutes were because of just a fatigue issue. Wouldn't surprise me, but he did do some nice things tonight, despite being, only a -2 in the plus minus. So I think it's going to come down to those three. They're your lesser guys in the rotation, especially with Damari starting to get his feet back a little bit. Alan Crabbe's playing well, and Rondo Hollis Jefferson are playing well also, and Joe Harris I forgot to mention too. So I think it's going to be down to those three. Those guys are 8, 9, and 10 in our rotation.
And then you got Trevion Graham, I would assume, be coming back soon. I would expect to see him at least January 2019. So that's another guy that can kind of push for some minutes as well. It'd be interesting what happens if Rodions keeps bringing that energy, like you instantly feel him out there. And like you mentioned, the off ball and even the regular ball movement, just the passes. When he gets the ball, it doesn't really stick. He either passes it or he drives or he shoots. It's not like he's holding it and dribbling too much. So I really like that. But, Jack, we talked about the Nets really playing well the first, second, and third quarter. What went kind of wrong in that fourth quarter? Anything specifically? Was it just the Knicks young guy stepping up, or was the Nets offense getting stagnant, or the Knicks made an adjustment?
I think it was probably 1 and 2, Nick. I think the offense did get really stagnant. It was interesting to see D'Angelo Russell not play much of the quarter. Obviously, Spencer was, probably the better performer on the night, but I thought that, D'Angelo Russell was a key in sort of moving the ball well. So I would have liked to see him out there for a little bit longer, and I think that maybe looking back, Coach Kenny might see that as a bit of a mistake. But yeah, there was a lot of moments where the ball just stuck and there was too much dribbling, sloppy turnovers. And, the young guys just bring energy. Guys like Mitchell Robinson, Damian Dotson, Kevin Knox. These guys were just making plays. Frank Ntilikina, a lot of guys who have been linked to our Nets as well. They just were feeding off each other. They were feeding off the energy and feeding off the MSG crowd. It was good to have a few little moments from Alan Crabbe. And I think Rondo Hollis Jefferson and Spencer were key in sort of, culling the run, so to speak. But it was, a learning experience. But Nick, were you a little frustrated, like a lot of Nets fans, that Coach Kenny didn't call a timeout a little bit earlier throughout that stretch?
Yeah, I think it would have maybe made sense to call timeout there. I think there's different theories on it. Some people believe, let your team kind of fight through it and maybe conserve those timeouts for later in the fourth quarter, which obviously the Nets playing a ton of close games. But I think in that situation, especially for a young team, it would have made sense to call a timeout there. And then on the Knicks end, they were just playing with a lot of energy. And like you mentioned, that MSG crowd was kind of getting into it. But I can understand not calling it, but I think I personally would have called a timeout.
Yeah, I mean, there were certain points where Coach Kenny certainly had the opportunity to do it. I think a lot of guys were asking Brian, our boy Brian Fonseca, make sure to pose that question to Coach Kenny in the post game, whether they do or whether the Nets Daily and the other reporters do. If I was there, I certainly would have maybe chucked it and sort of worded it in a certain way to sort of turn it into a positive, so to speak. But yeah, it was certainly a little bit frustrating. But overall on the night, you can't fault Coach Kenny. But I think that's one thing. I remember putting out after the Raptors game where all the Coach Kenny haters now, but that's still one thing. We're not going to, be easy on him when he does make mistakes, and we're going to recognize the fact when he needs to improve, and he knows that as well. He's by far from being a perfect coach, but that's one easy area that you can just go, look, okay, this team's heading on a run here. I know my guys, probably need a little bit of let's just slow it down. Because you look to David Fisdale, who immediately would call timeouts, whenever he saw fit. I think you mentioned the timeout numbers. I think those take care of itself, Nick. I think you need to sort of be a bit more in the moment about it and sort of not think too far ahead, which I think Coach Kenny can do a little bit too much at times.
Yeah, and it's strange because we've seen him call good timeouts before when other teams go on a run. I mean, I remember in the New Orleans game, the Nets lost that one, but in the first quarter, New Orleans went on a great run, and he instantly called a timeout, and that pretty much turned the tables on the game and allowed the Nets kind of build a lead there. So obviously, he's not perfect. He needs adjustments, kind of just like the players he's developing as well, like we've mentioned a lot. So there's going to be mistakes every night. But what do you think? Just talking actually another coaching adjustment. So we've seen teams now start to double team D'Angelo Russell and Spencer Dinwiddie in the fourth quarter off pick and roll and kind of force them into weird situations. How do you think the Nets can adjust to that?
I think it's going to be an adjustment of the guys around them stepping up, Nick. Guys like Joe Harris, Wanda Hollis Jefferson, Alan Crabbe, being able to get them that space and even punish off find the extra space. If there's an open guy, if you're leaving Joe Harris or Alan Crabbe open, those guys are lethal. And D'Angelo Russell and Spencer Dinwiddie are very good passers. Maybe not necessarily elite passers, but very good passers, and they will find you. So I think it's going to be the teammates around them stepping up because D'Angelo Russell and Spencer Dinwiddie, they're our two best players. They're going to be the key to us going forward in terms of our success. So I think it's going to be about awareness. I'm sure the coaches will be showing them plenty of film so they can make the individual adjustments, but I'm sure they'll also be showing the team as well because our guys are starting to get a little bit more respect now. And with Karis LeVert out, the brunt of the offense is going to go through those two backcourt guys. And they're going to have to make the adjustments, but I've got my full faith in those two because, they continue to do good things going forward. And, it was D'Angelo Russell against Toronto, but tonight it was Spencer. So, both of these guys are going to be a big part of, Brooklyn's future if, all things pan out as we expect.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think you could argue that maybe those two and their chemistry in that situation and helping the other, if they're on the court in the fourth quarter together, which we've seen at times they haven't been, but I think they could help each other kind of getting to open space and helping your teammates. Like you said, maybe not just them as well. Maybe the guy who's rolling, you cut off your roll, you get to the open space just so they have an outlet for the pass. Now the defense is already broken down. You keep moving the ball like you were. I think it's just the team kind of adjusting to and the coaching staff putting that in their head. Like, we can still move the ball. We just have to kind of find open space so the guys can get open and make the pass.
Yeah, and little handoffs. Jared Allen has become it's one of his favorite plays. The sort of dribble handoff, take one or two dribbles. I think it's just about consistent movement. Not letting the ball just stick a little bit. Making the initial pass rather than waiting and over dribbling. I think playing more instinctual basketball. And I think D'Angelo Russell talked about that more with his shot. And Coach Kenny was like, we gave him a bit more free reign in terms of the offense being able to shoot that mid-ranger. That gives him a little bit more confidence and sort of not having to overthink, okay, I need to dribble more, I need to attack the rim more, I need to make sure I take a few, dribbles out. So I'm taking this from the perimeter rather than from 15 to 18 feet. So I think, just probably playing instinctual basketball at the same time because, there are going to be plenty of mistakes along the way, especially for a guy like D'Lo. But, it's all part of the learning process for this entire Nets organization.
Yeah, we still got plenty of work to do in the fourth quarter, like we said, with the offense getting stagnant. There's always a couple lazy turnovers. But Jack, any last thoughts on the Knicks and Nets game?
It just feels good to beat the Knicks,
Yes.
Nick. Say that a million times, but it's I mean, Dad walked in. My dad walked in like halfway through the last quarter. He's like, "They're gonna win this one," and he said it with like the tone where he's just like he knows that how like up and down I've been with the Nets sort of winning and losing streaks. So it was good to get the W onto the Sixers, who we've shown some decent form with. But a couple of days off, which should hopefully allow the guys to reset, watch some film, get to some practices. It's a good sign going forward to be on a winning streak heading into a mini break.
Yeah, it's back-to-back wins for the first time this season. As you mentioned, that's Republic account. The first time they won the second night of the back-to-back on the road in what? Since when, Jack?
3 years, I believe, 2015.
So that is ridiculous in a way. But moving on to the first game of the back-to-back against the Raptors, and that's won 106-105 in overtime in another nail-biter, but they pulled this one out. What were your takeaways from this one?
Man, we beat the best team in the league, Nick. We'll be doing the team player rankings for, Full Access Hoops and OTG Basketball very soon. But hint, hint, the Toronto Raptors are certainly up there. So I wasn't expecting much, but there was just a part of me where the Nets did this against the Oklahoma City Thunder, the best defensive team in the league. We destroyed the Philadelphia 76ers earlier in the season and also had a very close loss to them if it weren't for Jimmy Butler. So the Nets know how to play up to capabilities. We played well against the Warriors as well. So you never discount, Brooklyn no matter what. I'm sure plenty of others will, but the team basketball is sort of what makes a difference. And the way we played tonight, the Nets, the Raptors are far deeper, far more talented, but it was team basketball that won it. And D'Angelo Russell was just, his leadership and his ability to just go, this is my game, shone through.
Yeah, it was a big third quarter from D'Angelo. I believe he had 15 points. But what I was impressed with was some of the hustle and defensive effort plays. After losing a game in OKC, a game to OKC, that you were up big, really hurt the team. You're possibly your best player comes in and he puts in a ton of energy. He played great defense on Kyle Lowry too. We got the big high five from Kenny Atkinson during the game, which I thought was pretty cool too. So I think D'Angelo just having that monster game. Spencer also stepped up too, didn't have a bad game either. And just the team just looked like they were playing with full effort throughout the 48 minutes, and they really wanted to win that game. And there wasn't a ton of mistakes, and they played the best team, like you said. So I think there's just really not much to say about it other than they just came to play.
Yeah, the engagement was there for 4 quarters. I didn't necessarily expect us to close this one out because, the Toronto Raptors with Kawhi Leonard and Kyle Lowry, even Pascal Siakam, it's 3 possible All-Stars right there, 2 at least guaranteed. This is a really, really good team. And, for them to have one of their few losses against us, it shows that we can match ourselves against some of these better teams in the NBA. And, all it takes is, a statement performance from some of our guys and, 48 minutes of good quality basketball. It doesn't necessarily have to be, awesome offense, but just grinding it out, making the shots when possible, making the right plays, showing the hustle, and just that Brooklyn sort of energy and spirit that we've come to know and love from our guys.
Yeah, and we were kind of questioning that after the Cavs game. We saw it in OKC for the first 3 quarters, but and again in the Toronto game, we saw them really step up, and they really grinded out because they had 20 turnovers in the Raptors game, but they killed them on the boards, 60-41.
Yeah, rebounding, Nick. We just mentioned it when it came to the Knicks game. I think probably with any team in the NBA, the Knicks win it, the Nets win it, then the Nets are going to generally win the games that go with it as well. Toronto just had a tough time. Guys like Jonas Valanciunas, when they do play that small ball as well, you can sort of punish them a little bit. But I think, it's become a real emphasis on both sides of the floor, offensive and defensive rebounding. And it's become a real sort of, focal point to winning Nets basketball. So, I think it's probably one of the most underrated aspects of basketball these days. We talk about the 3-point shot more than anything, pace and space. And yes, the Nets love it as well as much as any other team. But, when we rebound the ball, we do good things. And, it allows us to get in transition. It allows us to get second chance points. And it just feeds, across all other aspects of the game.
Yeah, exactly. And what else did you like from this game? I thought in the third quarter there was Kenny Atkinson took out Jared Allen, and maybe because of foul trouble, or maybe he didn't like something he did, but he put Ed Davis in early. Ed Davis did a better job on Valanciunas in that third quarter, and then Jared Allen seemed a lot fresher for the rest of the third quarter and that fourth quarter.
Yeah, Ed Davis, 21 minutes, Nick, plus 11. Him and D'Angelo Russell won that plus minus battle, for the Nets. Not many other guys were positive in that sort of sense. Jared Allen himself was minus 10. So I think we mentioned, the times where we criticize Coach Kenny where it's warranted, but we also do give him his kudos where it's due. And, it's a really underrated move for being able to recognize and sort of make in-game adjustments, which I think a lot of people have criticized him for not being able to make those in-game adjustments when necessary. But he certainly did it. He was able to sort of read the flow of the game, read the flow of his plays, because, if anyone knows our guys more than anyone, it's definitely Coach Kenny. You cannot deny the love and knowledge he has for each of his guys and the tendencies that he knows. So I think just a lot of little things that Coach Kenny did in this game made a real impact on winning basketball. And, I think it sort of silenced some of the people who had been criticizing him incessantly for quite a bit.
Especially going up against Nick Nurse, who some people has a Coach of the Year candidate, who's
Yeah,
obviously with
yeah.
the Raptors having the best record. So, I thought it was a nice coaching performance from Kenny. And Rondé at the end of that game in overtime on Kawhi Leonard, locking him up defensively, forcing the pass to Lowry, who kicked it out to Van Vliet, is exactly what you want to do. You want, probably the fourth or fifth best player on the floor on the opposing team to have to knock down that shot to beat you. Not like the OKC game where you're giving it to Paul George, who already had 40-plus points.
Yeah, I remember tweeting, rewatching the replay of the OKC game, and Rondé made the mistake, and he redeemed himself and then some, on one of the MVP contenders right now, and probably the best two-way player in the game, in Kawhi Leonard. I think Jared Dudley came out with a tweet as well, and someone was sort of saying, well, you guys left Van Vliet open, and he responded with, look, you're going to make anyone but Kawhi win the game for you. And I think Van Vliet as well did come in, just for the play and wasn't necessarily fresh and sort of game ready, so to speak. So I think that was, incredible defense from Rondé and the team and their awareness. You could just see that they really, really wanted this one. And, we talked about turning points and such, but, D'Angelo Russell's passion after the game, this really meant a lot to the Nets. And to beat, the Toronto Raptors, who are one of my favorite teams, outside of Brooklyn. And, it might be sacrilege to say against a division rival. But look, I'm not, it's not just Drake. I know you're a big Drake fan as well, Nick, but, there's just something about it. My other best Nick in my life, Nick Busing, me and him have always sort of thought of ourselves as Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan. So to get this win, and they're only on the up, the Toronto Raptors, to sort of be that blip on their radar when a lot of NBA pundits look back, because the Nets aren't going to get a lot of credit, but all coverage, they'll go, okay, well, who was the only team that sort of bet the Raptors on this sort of run? And you'll go, look, it was the Brooklyn Nets. So it was certainly a very, very satisfying showing.
It really was. And the fact they beat them in overtime, when you have the team like the Raptors, who were, like we mentioned, are very talented, more talented than the Nets, they had that extra time to kind of beat it up and kind of clean up their mess from earlier, and the Nets held on and won it. I thought that was impressive. We do have to touch on one thing, though. At the end of the game, D'Angelo Russell on the last possession offensively had another turnover. He's had some late game issues. Is this something you're concerned about with him late in the game, or does he just kind of need to keep working on it, and eventually he'll get a hold of it?
Yeah, I think it's just knowledge from him. I was incredibly frustrated. I probably screamed so loud that my neighbors in the other suburbs in Sydney might have even heard me. It was a frustrating moment, but we if you look at it to the other end, we wouldn't have been in the game if it weren't for D'Angelo Russell's performance. He was absolutely outstanding, and he's made some timely mistakes in terms of when we look back to the Pelicans game as well. But hopefully this. OKC as well. Hopefully this is an impetus for him to go, look, I can't over dribble this. He's probably in his head a little bit. And I did see, in the NBA League Pass, sort of watching it as they went to the bench, he was having not a heated discussion, but a sort of very animated discussion with Jared Dudley going, look, this is probably what you need to do next time. And D'Angelo was like, look, I get it. I know. I'm not reading any lips here, but it was certainly, they were making the point, and I was probably, I'm construing the fact that D'Angelo's like, I wanted to run the clock down. I want it as much as possible
He just didn't do that, so that makes sense. What was it? Was it okay? Yeah, I think it was OKC where he didn't
Yes.
clock down all the way, and then obviously they got the extra time to run the full play. So I can get that. It's just like, I think the problem with that possession was he just held the ball for 24 seconds.
Way too long. And I think if he had have dished it off a little bit earlier, it would have been fine. Or if he had got it into his zone with maybe 5 seconds left, or got into D'Angelo Russell is really good when it comes to the pick and roll. With a guy out there, whether it's Jared Allen or whoever, he can get his own space and make shots from near anywhere on the floor, within, from the 25 feet and inside. So I think he just needs to have a little more game awareness. But, at the end of the day, we've got the W. So we can put it down to a positive learning experience rather than, a negative one that we dwell on.
Anything else stick out to you in this Raptors game that you want to discuss?
Yeah, it was good to see Rodion's. We talked about him in the Knicks sort of game, but he was a lot more positive in his performance in this one. He again, got the nod ahead of a guy like Shabazz Napier. Jared Dudley's minutes again 11. So we're sort of see them stem lower and lower and lower. I'm going to be interested to see what happens against Philly, whether that increases with the time off or whether a guy like Shabazz Napier does see some time, because I think he could match up okay against a guy like TJ McConnell. But again, that'll be something to see in the Philly performance. But nothing but good things from this Toronto Raptors performance, Nick.
Yeah, and to touch on Rodion's, I really like the play where I think he had a mistake on the offensive end, and the next play defensively, he got the steal and the slam. And that's one of my favorite plays in basketball. Great momentum twister right there. So if he can keep doing those type of things defensively, like we said, he has some work to do. But if he can put the energy in and get those deflections, I think that's huge.
Yeah, it seems to be, for a guy like Rondé, and I'll touch a little bit on Alan Crabbe as well, who I think, despite the fact that we say he is probably an absolute negative asset with how his contract is, he's starting to make the three-point shot. And if he's at least doing that and sort of opening up the floor a little bit, yeah, he wasn't great in this Toronto game, but, not many guys were from the field. But he's making the three, so that's more than we could say of him earlier in the season. So, and I think I saw it on the Brooklyn game or another Nets fan Twitter page. You can sort of see the confidence, and he's getting his legs a little bit more. You can sort of go, yeah, look, this is almost money now. So he may have his streaky games, but he's been very good of late, especially from the perimeter.
Yeah, he's starting to kind of get the pressure off because he's having some of these big games where it's like, all right, he looks at the box score, he's not doing too bad. If he can keep boosting that confidence, we don't need him to be amazing. We just need to be consistently pretty good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Having him and Joe Harris, two guys that can knock down threes at at least 38 plus a clip, I think that'd be big for the team.
Yeah, I think it changes our entire offense and allows us to be absolutely awesome. It was a nice performance from him, getting in the double digits as well. And, he is a good rebounder too. So I think that there are some things that Alan Crabbe is starting to do well, and he's becoming more of a positive sort of impact for the Nets than he was earlier in the season.
Yeah, I think I saw a stat before the Knicks game. He's one of the players in the league right now that had more points than shots. Obviously, I'm pretty sure that changed after the Knicks performance, but good for him to kind of get in that positive note. Now, we do have to touch on the one negative of the week so far. Well, the second negative of the week, another loss against OKC, where they had that big 20-plus point lead, and they blew it in the fourth quarter. Obviously, Paul George had 47, 25 in the fourth. We're not going to really break down the entire game because, like we said, the first 2.5 quarters were really good. What went wrong in this one, Jack? What happened where the Nets just couldn't win this?
The Nets just lost their way in terms of just having the awareness to be able to go, okay, well, who's the one that's going to cook us here? It's Paul George. And we didn't really have the capabilities to stop him. It was almost like, you just knew what was happening. And Paul George was just simply outstanding. And I think there were times where we could sort of see it happening, see it turning, but we just couldn't make the adjustments. And I think a lot of people on Nets Twitter following that game were just sort of saying, look, they have two superstars, we have none. And it's a lot harder to win and close out games when you don't have a superstar, so to speak. Caris LeVert was our sort of star closer. We're starting to sort of get that a little bit with D'Angelo, a little bit in glimpses with Spencer, but it's just tough. And when Rondé Hollis-Jefferson isn't at his best defensively, the Nets will struggle as well, because he is the guy that's probably going to be your stopper. And without Trevion Graham, a guy like Paul George is going to have his own. He was just simply awesome.
Yeah, now Rondé really didn't play a ton in this game. He only had 22 minutes. Do you think Kenny should have looked to maybe put him a little bit more late in that game when Paul George was cooking? Because physically, he's probably one of the only Nets that can really match up with him. Alan Crabbe, Joe Harris, Spencer Dinwiddie, all undersized.
Yeah, and a lot of those guys as well, undersized, and a lot of them don't have, despite Paul George having that, horrific injury, he's still very athletic and very crafty. I think Rondé can match him in that aspect, and he proved that he can with a guy like Kawhi Leonard, who I think, had an absolutely massive slam on us. But Paul George still has that hops about him too. So I personally would have liked to have seen it. We did see him out for the final play, and whether that was sort of playing in his mind, sort of he was overthinking things. Is like, I got to earn this for I haven't been out much tonight. I need to make sure I do the right thing. He was overthinking things. But yeah, it would have been nice to have seen that adjustment from Coach Kenny. It could have been the difference between winning and losing the game in such a tight tussle. But I think it's going to be, again, one of those things where we have to look back on and go, okay, this is what we did wrong, this is what we did right. And for the most part, it was a pretty positive performance. But, when you have Paul George making 25 points in a quarter and, not being able to guard him in that final stanza and that final play, it was just, we let them win the game.
Yeah, I'll touch on a couple points. First off, you mentioned Rondé being in there. I thought not only was it Rondé, I think it was Spencer Dinwiddie too. I think there was some miscommunication. I think he looked to switch and Spencer didn't look to switch. Then it was a late switch and then he bought the pump fake. You thought somebody else in the Nets, though, would step up there. Because, like, what happened in the Raptors game, they just forced somebody else to shoot the shot. We know Paul George had 47 at that time, or 45 at that, or what do you have, 44 at that time, and nobody kind of stepped up to contest a shot. And then very frustrating on the possession before that, D'Angelo giving them too much time and settling for a pull-up shot. And then the final possession where they couldn't even get the ball in bounds. I think that always hurts. That's been a major frustration of the season. The Nets have given up these big shots late, and then the next possession, they haven't even been able to get the ball in. Now, do you think that's on the coach, the players, the execution, the inbound passer? What is it? Why can the Nets not get these late passes in?
Well, I think it's more of the players, Nick. You can't get Coach Kennedy. He can't go out there and make the passes in bounds. So I think it has to be, you can make the argument that maybe one of the taller guys needs to be making the inbounds, whether it's a Rondé or whether it's a Jared Allen or whoever. But, obviously Coach Kenny values the spacing in terms of the offensive lineup. So I think it needs to be more on the players there. And, we talk about the timeout sort of issue as well. If there is, you have to take that extra time, and if they're available, do it. And sort of, because I know a lot of coaches who keep those up their sleeve. I think Popovich and Kerr are sort of masters of it. They want to see how the defense is being set. And then they go, okay, cool. We know how they're going to set. Let's maybe change it up a little bit here. And if Coach Kenny does have those up his sleeve, then do it. Tell his players to do it. I think there needs to be a greater awareness from our guys. And I think that we've started to show that in the Knicks and Raptors games.
Yeah, I think like you said, Jack, the inbound passer, I think, needs to be more crisp with their passes. We saw at times it's been kind of lackadaisical. Then also the players sometimes on their cuts aren't amazing. It's like they're kind of like running slow. I don't know if that's the design of the play, but they're not crisp late in that game. We need them to get open and get an easy pass in. And like you said, taller inbound passer. I think one thing I'd maybe like to see from Kenny is put a taller player out there like Jared Allen and use his vertical spacing and have someone throw an oop in that situation. Obviously, it's a tough thing to do, but at least you keep the defense honest. And that's something that, we saw from the Nets in the past, more in the New Jersey days. I'd like to see that a little bit more from the Nets right now, is take advantage of Jared Allen's, a potential above the rim.
Yeah, I think you can certainly make that argument there, Nick. I think Jared Allen's passing has a bit of a ways to go. He is a little bit sloppy in that sort of sense, but he has the potential there. I think that they need to. It's a double-edged sword. I'm probably going with devil's advocate here because I think that.
No, I mean more so not as a passer. I'm saying get him on the inbound in terms of rolling to the rim and setting screens, not as an inbound passer.
Yep. I certainly wouldn't argue with that. I think, again, we sort of talked about, and I talked about, he just values the spacing there. And I think Jared Allen hasn't proven the fact that, he can hit the three ball at a consistent rate yet. But, it depends on, that sort of margin. If it's a 1 or 2 point margin, maybe, the pick and roll is one of the safest plays to go with if you have a bit of time. Jared Allen can set a nice pick, can roll to the rim, incredibly well, and has, grown in leaps and bounds in that area, can finish with both hands. So I think it's adding a little bit of variety for a guy like Coach Kenny. But again, he's going to make his mistakes. He's going to do his good things. We'll recognize when he does both. And I think for the most part of that game, he was good. It was just, I think it was a lack of execution on both parties.
Yeah, I don't think it was much on the coach in that OKC game because they played great. OKC scored 39 in the fourth quarter. That doesn't happen because of the coach. That happens because your transition defense is trash. Your overall defense is trash. You're not guarding Paul George is trash. So I don't think you can put that really on the coach. I just felt like the effort really died. Someone brought up this point too, is OKC was missing a lot of shots in this game. Obviously, they're not a great offense, but the Nets kept giving them open shots, and they just started knocking down the fourth, got their confidence going. The Nets kind of let the momentum hurt them, and they only scored 19 points in the fourth. So it's like they just need to be on top and they need to do the small things. We saw the opposite thing in the Raptors game where they really grind out the fourth. I think they maybe had 19, the Raptors had 18 or something along those lines. So I think it's just like paying attention. I think transition D is something we saw tonight in the Knicks game too a little bit at times where they just got a little bit lazy. Don't let these teams get easy baskets. If you're forcing them in the half-court offense, you have a lot better chance of stopping them.
Definitely, and I think we are a team who is making adjustments. We are using these as experience to sort of learn from. A lot of these cliches are going to be a bit tiresome to fans and listeners, but they ring true. We haven't gone through these sort of trials and tribulations, and the only way you are going to grow from them is to sort of mark them down, watch the video, implement things at practice. Make the relevant adjustments in and out of games. But yeah, I think that going forward, all of these sort of things, we look at them with rosier lenses because of this sort of mini winning streak we've been on. So to be that close against one of the best defensive teams in the league, in Philly as well, the only real blip on the radar was the Cavs game, like you mentioned, Nick.
Yeah, exactly. These games, they had the 8-game losing streak. They had a lot of close games against great teams, and I'll argue for the Memphis game that they won that game and the refs took it away. That's my honest opinion. But the other games like Philly, like OKC, one bounce, even the Cavs game, one bounce goes their way. They win that game. We're talking about a really nice run for the Nets. So I think right now, like you said, Jack, with the back-to-back wins, it's easy to look back at the past and be like, all right, maybe they learned a lot about it, and this can be a turning point for the season. It's really going to be interesting to see what they do against Philly on Wednesday. They got a little bit of break. Great time to get some practice in and great time to get some adjustments in there.
Yeah, it's going to be a game by game thing. The season is there's still plenty of time to go, plenty of games to go. The Eastern Conference is still wide open after, the Washington had an absolutely horrific loss to the Cavs today. So, that 8th spot, might be within reach. Who knows? But at the same time, there's, I think the Nets fans need to be open to all scenarios. And I think that the front offices as well, because, we know how talented the draft class is, but, it's going to be, it's game by game. It's the cliches, they're cliches for a reason because they generally are ring true and they are true.
Yeah, and to just mention the playoff standings, only 3 games back for Orlando Magic. And we know Orlando was not a very good team last year after that first run they had. Obviously, a little bit different this year with new coach and everything, players stepping up, but definitely a possibility. And you mentioned the Wizards just got smacked by the Cavs. Now you look as a potential team that could kind of blow it up. And Miami's been a team that's kind of been on and off all season long. So the potential's still there for the Nets, but I think we're going to still need to see more growth from guys. If Allen Crabbe can maybe keep playing well, if Rondé can take those improvements, Jared Allen takes another step. The guards, I think one thing that's important, we've seen some positive plays from Spencer Dinwiddie and D'Angelo Russell, but they're not fully in sync. When they get fully in sync and learn to play great together, like we saw Karis LeVert and D'Angelo Russell do, I think that will be a huge, game breaker for the Nets.
Yeah, and we've seen it on a few occasions, Nick. The one that springs to mind most notably is that a game against Washington away from home. That was probably the best we've seen of them too. But, Spencer Dinwiddie is going back to his sort of backup role, sort of leading the second unit and then closing at times. And then, we didn't see D'Angelo Russell close out this game. So I think it's going to be, trial and error and seeing what fits and works best. I think come the midpoint of the season, it'll be fascinating to see where those two are at individually and where the team is at, in 10 to 15 games time, because I've mentioned it on many occasions, and I'm going to continue mentioning these two are the keys to our season. How they can gel individually and how they can gel together is going to be determined if we make the playoffs or if we are a lottery bound team. But the signs are good. They're at least playing well individually for the most part of the season. And who knows? D'Angelo Russell could even be an all-star if he starts to put up some big numbers as well, because, those sort of last couple of spots, even Spencer Dinwiddie is playing, incredibly well. So there's, the signs are there. It's going to be fascinating to see it unfold.
Yeah, I mean, if the Nets were able to get, to 500 or close to it or slightly above it, by the time February came along, it could really help their case, especially if there's an injury, what it always seems like there is, and the coaches have to sub somebody in. So, something to keep an eye on in this next stretch, which we've talked about over the last couple of buzzes, is still important. They have a lot of winnable games coming up. It's going to be taking care of business and seeing where you're at when the new year starts.
Yeah, absolutely. And, with Spencer Dinwiddie's shoes coming out, the nice momentum that he's got, I wish I had some extra money. Maybe I get a little bit extra money for
What are they, a
Christmas.
buck 50?
Yeah, they're not too bad. And, I'm all about supporting guys who put out their own sort of, go in a different sort of route. I'm not. I mean, not necessarily a big baller brand fan because I don't like the Lakers. I like Lonzo, but I don't like LeVar and the entire Ball family. Glorified Kardashians for me.
Or
But
that
I
price?
love. Yeah, I mean, I love Spencer, and I love what he's doing. Bringing attention to himself and bringing attention to the organization, and doing all these wonderful things with the designs that he's had. Really making the most of these new shoe rules where he's able to sort of showcase his artistic talents and his creativity. I'm all about it for Spence because he's a very, very intelligent dude, and he deserves all the success on and off the court.
Yeah, it's been really great to see, and obviously part of his dream project, which is huge. And we always appreciate Spencer on and off the court, like you mentioned, Jack. And also wanted to let you guys know this won't be the only buzz we'll be dropping. We'll be dropping another one tomorrow. We'll talk about some of the topics, some of the questions you sent us. We just wanted to get those game recaps in here. So definitely look out for another buzz dropping after this one. But Jack, always a pleasure. And you can always check out the buzz, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Dash Radio, and YouTube.